All right, so okay, there we go. So I'll just give my little intro here. This is a community meeting for our large solar. Well, I'm just doing this for the record.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, you're right. You're right, though. You're right. I should just do it in the Zoom because I have to do it twice.
I'll go ahead and mute myself.
All right. So all right. Thank you. Just
be hanging out.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Wish me luck.
Good luck.
All right. Thanks. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Albert Lopez, and I'm the plan director for the County of Alameda, and I'll be your host for tonight. I am going to, first thing I just want to do is make sure that we get some of the housekeeping out of the way by saying that, first of all, this meeting is going to be recorded and will be available on our website at some point for those that want to take a look at it later. This is actually the first time that I've hosted a large community meeting like this virtually. Usually we'd use a webinar format, which is a little bit more controlled. So hopefully there won't be any mishaps that are too large or too great tonight. First thing is that, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? All right, sounds good. It's a little different in the sense that we're going to be providing a lot of information to you, and then there'll be an opportunity to hear from all of you at some point in the meeting. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk about the agenda for tonight. Hopefully you can all see that, the agenda for tonight. And just for the record, I want to just make sure that we are all in the right meeting. So this is the Alameda County Planning Department, again, hosting the large commercial solar and battery storage policy development community meeting of February 8th, 2022. And we're hoping to have a 6 to 9 p.m. Meeting time for tonight. In terms of the agenda, I'm going to do an introduction and explain the process. We're going to go through some background material and hear from a couple of different speakers. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms, hopefully devote most of the time to hear from you folks, or for folks to be able to speak together in these breakout rooms, and then a little bit of time at the end for a report back. And so so that's the process for tonight. I'm going to be doing another presentation a little bit later as well as we get closer to the breakout rooms. But for now, I just wanted to kind of give you the broad strokes of what to expect for tonight. Again, I'm the plan director for the county. I've been working for the county for about 13 years. And I did want to describe the types of projects that are currently being viewed in the county as it relates to both solar and battery storage and renewables in general. I'm going to go through this quick little presentation pretty fast. I do want to devote most of the time again to the breakout rooms and let folks talk amongst each other about some of these issues before hearing back from them. But I do feel like it's very important to be able to get some of this preliminary information out there and to you to help the conversations. So we are, in the county has been working in the renewable space for many years, mostly wind power as a part of our Altamont Pass wind resource area. And a lot of our general plan documents and zoning do talk about wind power as being a land use that is permitted in the county. One of the areas that we don't have much regulation or policy is both in solar, specifically utility scale solar or battery storage. And those are two land use types that we are seeing some activity in the county. We do have projects in the hopper for both solar as well as battery storage. And I did want to just kind of make it clear that those projects are going through a county process. And I'm going to speak a little bit later about the overall process and how the Board of Supervisors for the county is involved in wanting to see this come to fruition in terms of the policy development aspects of it. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. One of the things that we wanted to jump into right away is to talk about the fact that we are primarily focusing on the rural portions of the county. I know that there is a great deal of interest in the urban area and different types of renewables that can be introduced into the urban area. And I wanted to mention that we do have a community choice aggregator in the county. It's our own CCA that was created a few years ago, the East Bay Community Energy. You may have heard of them. You may get their mailing pieces in the mail. If you're an Alameda County property owner, homeowner, you more than likely have seen some of their materials come to you at your home. So they are essentially our default energy purveyor in the county. And we wanted to hear from them early on in this evening. So I invited EBCE to send a presenter, and we have a couple of representatives from them tonight that I'm going to introduce in just a second. And hopefully, that will be able to provide some detail about EBC's role in the county, and specifically their solar siting study, which many folks in the audience have probably seen before, or maybe if you're not familiar with it, hopefully we can provide a little bit of information about what that solar siting study, what the purpose of that is, and how this sort of fits in with the larger conversation here. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to locate on here the presenters from, maybe you could raise your hand, that might help. I see Alex DeGiorgio. He's going to be one of our presenters tonight. Okay. Alex, can you hear me? Are you able to speak?
Yep. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, great.
Let's see if the audience can hear you. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear Alex.
Yep.
If I see thumbs.
I see hands and thumbs.
Okay, good. Okay, great. That's fine. And just before you start, I just want to let you, folks know there's about 55 participants in the meeting already, and we're admitting people as they come on. So Alex, thank you. I know that I thought you brought another staff member along with you tonight. I don't know if you both need to be able to present, but let me know if that's the case.
Thanks. I think I'll be able to handle the presentation, but we do have our public engagement coordinator, Kate Caddy, in the audience as well. Okay.
Great. Well, with that, I will turn it over to you then. And as we mentioned, we're trying to devote most of the time for our breakout rooms, and so most of the speakers tonight will be about 5 to 10 minutes. So with that, Alex, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Albert. And hello, everybody out there, and county staff, members of the public. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm Alex DeGiorgio, Public Engagement Manager for East Bay Community Energy. I'll just give a very quick high-level background info on who EBCE is and what our role is with the county. So EBCE, we are a community choice aggregator, as Albert mentioned. So we are a local government agency. We are technically we're a joint powers authority. So we are a collection of cities and the county, and our mission, among other things, is to provide competitively priced renewable energy to all of the communities and customers that we serve. We currently serve all of the incorporated jurisdictions in Alameda County, except for the city of Alameda, because the city of Alameda has its own small municipal utility district. So we serve all of Alameda County, all of its incorporated jurisdictions. And then we also serve the city of Tracy, just across the county line in San Joaquin County. And you could think of East Bay Community Energy and other CCAs like us, and there are many across the state now. You can think of us as the public option for energy administered at the local level. So we are responsible solely for the generation resources of the electricity, and we only deal in electricity, not in natural gas. So we don't provide any sort of gas service, just electrical generation service. And I want to make that distinction because all EBCE customers are still PG&E customers for everything except for the source of the electricity. So our customers still get their bills from PG&E. EBCE's generation charges are a line item on the PG&E bill, and those charges would replace what folks would otherwise be paying PG&E for PG&E's energy supply. So if they're our customers, then they'll be purchasing energy from our energy supply portfolio, which is a minimum of 5% more renewable than PG&E standard option. And then of course we have a 100% renewable option for a penny per kilowatt hour more. And that comes to be about $5 to $7 more per month for the average household in our service area. By state law, we are the default provider in all the communities that we serve. So that means that unless folks opt out of EBCE service, we'll be providing them service automatically. So our line item charges, those replacement charges, will appear on people's bills. If they're with our standard energy option, the Bright Choice option, it'll be at rates that are 1% lower than PG&E standard rates. So more renewable energy, but lower rates. That's the general value proposition that we provide to our customers. And I want to mention that our governance structure is composed of democratically elected leaders from each jurisdiction that we serve. So there's a city council member, or in the county's case, a member of the county board of supervisors. Right now it's Supervisor Valle. And our rates, policies, programs, et cetera, are all considered and reviewed in public meetings, just like a city council meeting or a county board of supervisors meeting. We are subject to the Brown Act. So part of the goal with Community Choice Energy was to make the energy economy more democratic, more transparent, more accountable to the public. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that Director Lopez himself, along with his colleagues at the county, had a huge task before them to create this Joint Powers Authority, and spent a couple of years putting together the Joint Powers Authority, putting together a steering committee that met for about a year and a half. I had the honor of being able to serve on that steering committee. So there was a whole lot of work, community-based work. Lots of different coalitions were there to put this together. So that's about EBCE and who we are. So in order to meet our mission of making renewable energy more accessible and more affordable to the public, a big part of what we do, and about 95% of our budget, goes towards purchasing energy at wholesale, and then we provide it at retail to our customers and communities. So at this time, we have 12 projects contracted for new in-state renewable energy generation. So that would be a total of, right now, nearly 800 megawatts of wind and solar, California-based wind and solar, and about 350 plus megawatts of energy storage. And that's just so far. We just launched service in 2018, so we're about 3 years old now, but we're ramping up very quickly to develop more in-state renewable energy projects. We also have a local wind energy project, the Scott Haggerty Wind Energy Center in the Altamont Pass, as you can see in the background behind me, and we are eager to help reinvest our net revenues in the communities that we serve through various forms of project development. Now that could be renewable energy project development for generating the energy, but it also includes a whole host of other programs, such as electric vehicle charging infrastructure, so transportation electrification, including medium and heavy duty vehicles, transportation electrification, building electrification, local resilience. And by local resilience, I mean installing on a distributed level solar plus battery storage. We have a program, just one example, a program called the Resilient Home Program, where we help homeowners install solar plus battery storage so that the lights don't go out during the power shutoffs. So there's a lot of different programmatic offerings that we have in addition to procuring renewable energy on behalf of our customers. Some of our energy supply portfolio, we get a lot of questions on, well, what is your energy supply? And of course, the energy supply changes from year to year, as older contracts expire and new ones become active. And then of course, with renewable energy, since it's intermittent, it varies from year to year, how much sunlight we had or how much wind we had. So the most recent year that we reported that's available is for 2020. And all of the power resources that we use in 2020 are available on our website. We have to report, like any other utility, to the Public Utilities Commission and the California Energy Commission on what our resource supply is, so it gets publicly and transparently verified. Some of our older contracts were for large hydroelectric resources, and also out of state in the Pacific Northwest when we first launched. So that was some of our first contracts were there. As folks may already know, large hydroelectricity is unfortunately becoming a diminishing resource due to climate change and the era of mega droughts. So we're having to find alternatives to large hydroelectricity. I think one aspect of that I think will be relevant to this group is the solar siting study that was done some years ago. I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, as part of the initial process of EBCE's local development business plan. And so the solar siting study was a good first pass at identifying potential locations that could be suitable for smaller scale project development in the urban areas. Now, the solar siting study was a technical study. It did not include a financial analysis. So, it wasn't really a blueprint for how we were going to provide power broadly across our service area, but it does provide a handy tool for developers out there that want to check out sites and do the due diligence to see if they're suitable for development, and then they could potentially participate in one of our RFOs, or requests for offers, through which we procure energy. So just to be clear, EBCE doesn't kind of identify where the energy projects are going to go. We have a process, an RFO process, or request for offers process, where our team identifies the most cost-effective and beneficial projects for our supply portfolio and for our customers and communities. I know that we've got a long meeting ahead of us, so I don't want to drone on here. Albert,
well, yeah, you're just at about 9-10 minutes, so I think you just nailed it just about right.
Okay, great.
I appreciate it, Alex, for coming and sharing the history of EBCE and what you do, and also a little bit about the economic model that you follow. So appreciate that.
Sure thing.
Thank you. The next presentation is actually a planner in our department. And Allison is here. Let me find her. Maybe Allison, you could raise your hand. Oh, there she is. Okay. So one of the things that that has come up in much of the work that we've done with developing these solar policies, a lot of comment that we've gotten from the public is about mapping and understanding the layout of the land in Alameda County. It's a pretty big county. We have a big rural area. And so we've done some of the least conflict mapping that people have asked for. We do have lots of data in the county. Some of it's great, some of it's not so good. Some of it does require a little massaging and establishing values for different aspects of all the data that we have. And so we're going to share tonight a few of the maps that I think are really helpful for this conversation about developing policy around solar and battery storage. And there is several maps that are on our website as well. The maps that we're going to show you tonight will be on our website shortly as well. And again, there's no shortage of data sets out there, but again, some of it are better than others. And we're going to share tonight some of the ones that we think are really, we have good data for and also are helpful to move this conversation forward. So Ali Abers, thank you for participating tonight. And I will turn it over to you for the next section.
Thank you, Albert. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine.
All right, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So as Albert said, let's see, get this share started first. And all right, are you seeing the slideshow in the large version now?
Actually, it's kind of like the preview.
It's the presenter version. Okay,
Yeah.
let me stop the share really quickly and start over. Give me just one moment. Okay, let's try this again. Oh, it's not wanting to let me. Am I still sharing my screen?
No, you're not. When you first came on, it looked fine. Pretty.
It did. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just go with that then. All right. I'm just having trouble getting it to go to the full version. So this will do for now. Does that look okay?
You did. I think that looks fine. I can see it.
Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm having trouble with the display settings. So this will be on our website. So you can take a closer look.
I think it looks fine.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Ali Abers. I'm a planner on the policy team in the planning department. And as Albert mentioned, I'm going to show you a few maps that demonstrate the types of data that are available to us and a few ways that we have been thinking about layering them to identify areas of potential conflict for solar development. So you should see a map that says agricultural lands by land use designation. And this shows within unincorporated Alameda County, so these shaded areas are all of unincorporated Alameda County. This shows 3 agricultural land use designations. The green is large parcel agriculture, the purple is resource management, and this kind of salmony color is water management, and then this gray is the remainder of unincorporated Alameda County. And Albert, did you want to say anything specific about the importance of those 3 areas?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. So it's important to note that these are the bulk of what we have to work with in terms of land that's available potentially for these types of land uses. A large parcel agriculture tends to be the most flexible. It's where we do have visitors serving commercial uses like event centers and wineries and such. Resource management is similar to what the name suggests. It's more high resources in terms of natural resources for the most part, and scenic resources. And then water management is probably our most restrictive area, which mostly is SFPUC watershed area, which, as you'll see, it's a lot of it's down here, Sonol and stuff. And so the right now the projects that are being proposed and projects that have been approved in the county are mostly all in the large parcel agriculture area. And as you can also see, a lot of that actually is just open range land that's used for grazing. So yeah, that's I think an important distinction to keep in mind as you go forward tonight. Thanks, Ali.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so the next map shows parcels under Williamson Act contract, and these parcels are all also in one of those 3 land use designations: resource management, water management, or large parcel agriculture. This tannish color, so this is actually at the parcel level. This tannish color is non-prime parcels. And that's a distinction made at the state level by for parcels under contract with the Williamson Act. And then these kind of bright green, emerald green parcels here are designated as prime land under the Williamson Act. So that is that map. The next one is USDA farmland classifications. And this is it's a USDA designation for different types of farmland. The majority of this area is what they call non-prime farmland. So that's that tan color. This bright green color is prime farmland if irrigated. And then the darker green color is farmland of statewide importance. And then this fourth map shows critical habitat for 6 different threatened or endangered species. One that a lot of folks might be familiar with is the California red-legged frog, that's shown in green. And there are some, it's important to note on this map that there are some areas where habitat for 2 of these endangered species will overlap. So for example, this area right here shows overlap between the Alameda whipsnake and the California red-legged frog. So we have worked on just doing a couple of examples of how we might take those data and layer them together to show areas of most and least conflict for solar development. So this is just taking that USDA farmland classification map that we looked at earlier. And it's kind of hard, I hope you all can see this, but what we did is we took those 3 classifications from not prime farmland all the way up to farmland of statewide importance and just assigned numbers to them. So the majority of this area was assigned a 1, next level up gets a 2, so that peachy color, and then this reddish color is a 3. Just, you know, in order of importance, the numbers themselves are just relative, you know, to one another. And then we take this critical habitat for endangered species map that you saw earlier and did the same thing. So if there's one species, like in this area here, that has critical habitat on this map, we gave that area a 1. If there are 2 species, you know, habitat for 2 species that are impacted, that area gets a value of 2. So just 1 and 2 are the 2 possible values on this map. And then what we did was we took those 2 maps, so your USDA farmland classifications and critical habitat with those values, added them together, basically took those 2, layered them on top of each other to come up with this map. So this layers all of the data from both of those 2 maps on top of each other. So the minimum value on this minimum conflict value is a 1. And then a 5 would be, I think there's only maybe 1 5 up in the northeast up here, would be an area of highest conflict because it would have, in this case, prime farmland and habitat for 2 endangered species. And that, here's the final larger version of that same map. And that's just demonstrating how these data might be used to come up with potential areas for conflict and potential areas where there might be less conflict, like down here or up in this area. And that's all I've got.
All right, thank you, Ali. Appreciate it. I hope that it does give folks a little, just a peek at some of the data that we have and how we're able to manipulate that, and how that, you know, those data sets can be helpful towards for example, when our decision makers have to make, you know, make a decision on projects, you know, how this data can be helpful. You know, there, as part of this group that's in preparation for tonight, you know, we have a smaller working group of folks that are both in our Ag Advisory Committee as well as folks that are in the industry. And one of the things that we really didn't have strong agreement on is developing, for example, a map that would show, you know, parcels like this. These parcels have like the lowest conflict, and these ones have the highest, and a gradation of that. We haven't really arrived there yet, and I think that, you know, one of the things, it's I think a good question, an open question in terms of debating how we use this data to some degree. But I think just anecdotally, I think other jurisdictions have kind of gone down that path with not necessarily great results. And so I think that's one of the reasons why there may be some hesitancy to do that in this particular case. But given that, you know, the upshot is that we do have, you know, pretty good data to understand habitat, to understand areas that might be important farmland or important soil. And again, those all are data sets that inform any decision making that we do. I'm going to go back to the agenda again because I kind of can forget where we're at here. So we looked at the mapping. I think that I was going to do. I have a presentation myself that goes over the main policy areas, as well as the questions that we want you to consider in the breakout rooms. And so what I'm going to do is Open that up at this point. 1 second, please. I think you might have the same issue that you did, Ali, with it's hard to go full screen and then go back to Zoom.
Yeah, I think it helps if you start with full screen to begin with, but
yeah, all right. Well, I guess I could try it, see what happens. Please bear with me here, folks. Okay, that's definitely not what I wanted to do. Sorry. Oh, God. Okay, I'm gonna go back to Zoom, share my screen, and I will. Okay. So hopefully you can all see this.
it looks good. It looks like it's in presenter mode.
Okay, good. Thanks. All right. We'll get to. So again, this is the agenda for tonight. It's looking at these policy areas. I kind of talked about some of this. I'll go through here quickly. Again, we have ongoing interest in locating projects in the unincorporated county, primarily the East County. For those of you that may have been following this particular issue with solar projects in the county, we have been discussing this for many, many years at both mostly at the Ag Advisory Committee of the county, as well as our Transportation and Planning Subcommittee of the Board of Supervisors. And the Board of Supervisors have debated this or looked at this particular issue in the context of projects. And I think they were really concerned that, and much of the public was also concerned and brought this to their attention that, we don't have necessarily policies to be able to measure projects against. And so the Board of Supervisors did give us a deadline, or I should say gave me a deadline to bring forward policies to them, some final policies by the end of March of 2022. So I have about a couple months or so before I need to do that. And of course, asking for community input within these policy areas is definitely something that we place a high value upon in the planning department, as well as the larger county, which is the purpose of the meeting tonight. There's 5 principal topic areas that are going to be discussed tonight. I'll go into those in some detail. And then we may have a follow-up meeting depending on the outcome tonight and whether or not we need a follow-up meeting before these topic areas and policy areas get finalized. In terms of what to expect for tonight, so we did hear a variety of presentations already from EBCE. We looked at the mapping process that we have underway. And now we're at the point of setting contacts for the breakout rooms. This is a feature where essentially you're going to be put into, just like in real life, a room with, based on the amount of participants tonight, it looks like we'll be able to have maybe 7 or 8 breakout rooms with roughly about 7 or 8 people in them. And there's a couple things that will have to happen in the breakout rooms. One is for you all to select a recorder, as well as a reporter and timekeeper / moderator. And that's, again, the bulk of the time tonight. The idea is that when we come back at the end, that you would have someone assigned to be able to report out on what you discussed. And also, I did mention a recorder. If you want to record the breakout rooms, it's my understanding from our admin folks, our IT folks, is that we've allowed that to happen on our side, but someone has to record on your side to make that happen. And hopefully those that are a bit more familiar with Zoom understand that process. So now into the meat of the subject here, the topic areas that we're going to be covering tonight. Agrivoltaics and photovoltaics, willing to mac lands, prime soils, important farmland, what kind of trade-offs the county should be considering in return for allowing projects to occur in our jurisdiction. And then finally, a question about what kind of limits should there be on development. For example, should there be a cap on the amount of projects, whether there be megawatts or acreage? And I'm going to go into some detail on all these areas. Jumping right into agrivoltaics, This is a term that, is pretty new to me and maybe to you as well. And I think it's important to look at the definition of agrivoltaics. So I'm just going to read this slide. So agrivoltaics, or AVs, is the co-located production of solar energy and crops, is an emerging technology that can reduce competition for land and provide climate-smart solutions to improve land use efficiency, combined crop and electricity yield, crop water use efficiency, profitability, and the economic resilience of farms. And so this definition, I don't know if it's the official definition or anything like that. I don't know that there is one, but I did get this from the internet, and it seemed to be a good explanation of what we believe agrivoltaics to be. There's a couple pictures I'm going to show you here that kind of give the idea. I think of, in this case, a picture probably is better explainer than I am in terms of what we're looking at, but essentially it's a working farm that combines, it's a mixed use project that combines both solar energy generation as well as crops of some sort that can either be grown between the panels or underneath panels. And certainly there is a lot of information about agrivoltaics that you can find online and do your own research, et cetera. But we did kind of want to give a very introductory explanation of what it is and how that could potentially could be useful here in the county. I do have another photograph of what that may look like out in the real world, and just some notes here that there is a potential for a synergetic food, energy, water benefit for a project like this. It is more of an emerging land use type as opposed to an established model, and there aren't necessarily a lot of specific local examples of this where we're able to generate lots of power as well as food. I did, when I talked to EBCE about this a couple of months ago, and I talked to their director, one thing that he was telling me was that they are not at this point purchasing any power from a agrivoltaics type of project, which I thought was interesting. And so there are lots of research going on in this area, which you can also find online, and it's something that we're certainly interested here in the county. On the other side of the coin is photovoltaics, which is something that you probably are more familiar with or have probably heard this, also known as a solar park or solar farm or solar power plant, is a large-scale grid-connected photovoltaic power system designed for the supply of merchant power. They differ from building-mounted and other decentralized solar power because they supply power at the utility level rather than to a local user. And so I think this is, again, one of the models that you're probably most familiar with. And these pictures are these are pictures of other projects in the state, and sometimes even out of state. And they, in most cases, look like this. Again, this is the most common application type received by the county. Currently, there's none of these types of projects operating in the county, although there has been one approved that's currently being litigated. The other thing about these is I've shown this particular picture here, but the height of the panels, how they rotate, and the spacing can vary. Moving on to battery storage, this is another topic, another project type that we're seeing lots of interest in the county. I would say that there's one active application in the department and two other projects that are sort of kicking the tires and seeing whether or not they're going to submit an application or not. This is another area where we have very little language or policies, regulations in our general plan or zoning, and this is something that is something that we should plan for in the county, given that they also are part of the overall renewable picture. I got this picture off the internet, which shows that these are usually small container-like equipment. Again, there is interest in our county. Similar to solar, they can be very land-intensive uses. And from just the limited amount of knowledge that we have on this, these projects seem to be they want to locate near existing substations to feed the grid. And that certainly is the case for the one application that we have in the department filed. That project is located out near the county line with San Joaquin, near the large Tesla substation. Moving on to the Williamson Act, this is another topic area that we're going to be asking you to opine about. This is also known as the California Land Conservation Act of 1965. It's been on the books for decades. We did see earlier a slide of all the land that is under Williamson Act in the county. There's thousands of parcels that are under Williamson Act contracts. This program essentially it allows local governments to enter into contracts with private landowners for the purposes of restricting specific parcels of land to ag or related open space uses. And so in return, the landowners receive a property tax assessment, which are much lower than normal because they are based upon farming and open space uses as opposed to full market value. So again, many parcels in our ag land are under Williamson Act contracts. And as part of that program, we do have uniform rules, which are essentially a set of standards and regulations that we use to implement the Williamson Act at the local level. Contracts run in 10-year periods and they're renewed each year, essentially as a rolling 10-year contract. The uniform rules that we have currently on the books, and this is very important for considering solar, is that right now our uniform rules contain principles of compatibility, and there's a lot of detail there, but to sum it up, essentially the principles of compatibility ask us to not impair the long-term primary agricultural use of a property that's under contract. And to support that principle, the county has adopted, we have currently on the books a 10-10 rule, which essentially says that you can use 10 acres or 10% of a parcel for solar panels, whichever is less. That is a local rule that can be changed, but it's important to note that the principles of compatibility remain, so that we essentially, we couldn't just take a parcel that was under Williamson Act and not have any agriculture on it, because that certainly would be antithetical to the reason that that program exists. And so one of the questions that's on the agenda tonight is to look at what kind of changes potentially we want to make to our Williamson Act program, and whether or not folks should continue to get a tax benefit if they are also operating a solar project on their Williamson Act contracted land. I wanted to talk about in prime soils, important farmland. I just have a couple slides left. Our county has historically placed a high value on its agricultural history, including its soil quality. Generally, when you use prime soil, important farmland for something that's other than these uses, mitigation of one-on-one replacement is common. There's some underutilized soils and farmland in the county. Sometimes that's due to the lack of irrigation or the lack of water, which could be in some cases a property owner's choice to not be important farmland or prime soils. One of the questions that's been debated on this issue is, does the solar battery project represent a temporary use of land, or is it a permanent use of land? And most power contracts are for 20 to 30 years. So that's just a question that should be discussed. And again, the main question here is that if some of these areas that are prime or important farmland are utilized for solar or battery storage, what should the county ask for in return? And then the last question is a very general question. Actually, this is the fourth question. There was one more after this. In terms of just general compromise, given the conflicts between open space and agriculture and the desire for local solar, what is a reasonable compromise that the county should consider? This is a very open-ended question, but it's also one that it would be great to get some of your ideas about what kind of compromise that the county should consider when looking at projects like this. Again, there's trade-offs between wanting to have local solar as well as maintaining as much open space and agricultural areas as possible. And then this is the last question about limits. Other parts of the county, we know we have limits on density. In our wind resource area, for example, we have limits on the wind turbines that was established through an EIR. That in that particular case was put into place because of concern with bird mortality. So limits are a way to create some certainty for developers, while also offering some protection from unfettered development, which is certainly a concern of some. So the question here really in terms of limits is that what limits should be placed on projects? Should there be a total limit in acreage or megawatts potentially devoted to these projects? And again, that's something that you'll be discussing in your breakout rooms. This is my last slide. That's going to just kind of set the context here for breakout rooms. The number of rooms is going to depend on the number of attendees. It looks like we have 63 attendees. We wanted to have about 8 people per room. So it looks like we're going to have about 8 rooms, if I'm doing my math correctly. There's some basic ground rules in terms of just being respectful to other people's opinions. I think that we've probably all done this long enough to know some of these basic ground rules. When you select your recorder, moderator, and reporter, it's important for the moderator to understand that what we don't want is someone to necessarily use up all the time that you have, because we do have limited time. The reporter is being asked to report back at the end of the night of what your group came up with and some of the ideas and concerns that were in your group. As I mentioned before, if you want to record your breakout room, you could do that on your side. That's been allowed, or we clicked the right button in Zoom to let that happen. There are some staff members that are out, and so if they're in a breakout room, they can self-select to record the meeting, the breakout room. I will be sending out the prompts and kind of doing I guess like a timekeeping of my own on this side, in terms of getting a prompt for each question when the time is up. Based on the amount of time that we have, we did want to allow at least about 20 minutes for each question. Quick introductions are okay, but keep in mind of the time. It's pretty limited tonight. And again, the reporter, when you come back, should capture the essence of the points raised, and we're not looking for everyone to agree. And so that's going to be the end of my presentation. Again, we're going to go into about 8 breakout rooms or so, and there'll be one of the functions of Zoom is that we can send messages to each room all at the same time, and so we'll kind of give you a prompt of when you should be moving on to the next question or so. The idea is that we would try to wrap up around 9 o'clock, and there's a lot of content, a lot of discussion that folks want to have, and so that's the target. And so I don't want to take any more any more time talking, and let you get at it. I will. So for those of you who haven't done this, you'll see something that just kind of, a little icon that says you're now going into a breakout room, and so that you should be there with about 8 other folks or so. And I'm going to do that now. So thank you very much. So there will be 7 to 8 participants per room. Okay, folks, welcome back to the main room. I hope you all had a wonderful time in the breakout rooms. I was able to pop into a few of them and see folks discussing these topics, which is very exciting for me to watch as a fly on the wall. The time is 8:30 and we were going to try to wrap it up in the next half an hour or so. Given that we had 8 rooms, if we do about 5 minutes each, we'll just go over a little bit. I was hoping that we could start off with room number 1. And if you could self-identify by raising your hand, that would be a great help. And we'll just report out the sessions one by one. This is all being recorded, so we can go back and refer to it. And so with that, do we have the reporter from room number 1? Anybody from room 1? I don't see a hand up or anything like that. You guys can hear me, right? Take a thumbs up. Okay. Oh, okay. There's our reporter from number 1, Lawrence Abbott.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I was taking notes for our group, but I didn't write down what group number we were in. But it was the group with the 3 Larrys, so I don't think it was number 1. I'll go back on mute and just hopefully somebody will raise their hand when they realize it's the 3 Larrys.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, let's move on then to group number 2. Is there any, can you raise your hand if you're number 2? Is that Donna? Okay, Donna.
Okay. Our group on question 1, our group was very concerned that that agrivoltaics is a interesting concept, but has not been proven yet on a large scale, has not been shown to work, and therefore we felt it was premature. We had a landowner that felt that it's been proven in the East Coast, but not proven here in California sufficiently, or especially in the Eastern Alameda County. So we did have one person that felt it's an interesting concept and we should try perhaps looking at it. But the majority feel that it's premature and too early to put it into a solar policy. And also we had one speaker say that it is difficult with agrivoltaics because the solar farms need to be spread out. And so if they're low, and if they're very, so that tractors can get through, and if they're very large, they have to have the tractors go underneath. And there's a lot of cost involved with agrivoltaics because of the steel. And so they didn't feel that EBCE would look at it because the expense is too high. On the second question, should the county relax the 10-10 rule? Again, we had a rancher that felt very strongly that we need to provide sufficient food for our country and for our area, and it should be with local farming and grazing, and we should protect the Williamson Act. The majority felt that we should not change the Williamson 10-10 Act. The landowner also wanted to clarify, because the county did not really make this clear, that the assessment is made not just on the land, but what is produced on the land. And they're 10-year contracts, so that even if they're not producing something actively, they're not kicked out of the Williamson Act. But again, there are many rules that are going to be changed under the Williamson Act, and the Department of Conservation is coming out with some compatibility issues that we really need to look at. And again, the majority felt that we should protect the 10-10 rule. We had one person, a minority, that felt perhaps we could increase a small portion of that land to allow for some type of balance. But again, the majority felt we should not touch the Williamson Act. And again, we should look at the new rules coming out by the Department of Conservation for compatibility. The third question, prime soils. Everybody in our group, except for one, felt that farmlands are prime land and that we should protect our farmlands, that we need a natural preservation of our prime land, our farmlands, that also rangelands and wildlife corridors and habitat are endangered, and that any areas that need to be developed into solar or battery should go in disturbed land or industrial areas. There was one person again that felt that climate change is increasing and that we need to look at that, but the majority again felt that it was critical to protect farmland so that batteries and the solar should not go on farmland, open space, or areas of habitat. And again, we can't replace that land. One-to-one mitigation would not be sufficient. And that solar battery projects are still very much in development. And there are many issues that have not been addressed, like the chemicals, lithium and cobalt that are used in them. And so it's really critical that we look at these areas before we move forward with that, and felt very strongly that Measure D is violated if we go to urban or commercial uses within our ag lands, our farmlands, and our open space, that this would be a violation of Measure D. And again, the rancher wanted to point out prime soil and food is needed to feed our nation and our local population. We don't want to look to other countries to feed us. We need to protect our land. We've lost land in San Jose, Imperial Valley, and other prime farmlands. We need to protect it here. We can't replace it. Conflicts. There were questions about how could we solve the dual issue of protecting agricultural land and providing solar, and many felt that we could do it if we had some tax equity, that right now some of the solar benefits are going to tax credits for investors. It's not helping local economies, that we need to look at mapping, that it has worked well in Solano, Sonoma, Contra Costa, Santa Clara, other counties, that we need to look at incentives and to help provide more rooftop distributed solar, that the dual goals of providing solar and protecting farmland can work if we go with looking at solar rooftop in the built environment first, and then large-scale solar only as a last resort. And again, that we need to have a systematic conservation program with critical areas, and how do we preserve agriculture. And mapping is going to be critical. Limits on solar projects. We felt the limits should be one, it should not go on agricultural lands, and two, it should not go on biological habitat. Yes, we have a climate change crisis, we have a homeless crisis, we have a COVID crisis, we have a lot of different problems facing our county, but we also have a biodiversity crisis that is just as real, and we need to look at providing energy in the built environment, and something that does not impair agriculture, does not impair biological habitat, And if it can be shown that, that there are areas where it would not impede any of this, they might be, it might be considered, but it would need to meet CEQA provisions in the policy, and that we should limit batteries to urban use. And if we do any kind of batteries or solar in the county, in the least impacted areas, that it would provide power for Alameda County residents only. And finally, that we need to take a regional look as well, that Eastern Alameda County is a connector between Northern California and Southern California, and we need to make sure that that connection is respected, because if you take away Eastern Alameda County lands, you will have a loss of habitat and corridors between Northern California and Central and Southern California. So it needs to be looked at in a more regional usage. And then one person felt that it could be looked at if it was in disturbed land, and it would only be used for Alameda County residents, again, the power generated. And then other issues that came up, again, is that we look carefully at batteries and the chemistry and chemicals involved, that it's a very new industry, that we don't really have large-scale batteries available in storage, and the issue of lithium and cobalt and other environmental chemicals have not been looked at. And again, taking the regional view, not devaluing agricultural land and open space, one-to-one mitigation, we would lose half of what we have. That would not be sufficient. You cannot replace this land. And so we need to look at a larger scale mapping, including the Diablo range. And
Thank you, Don. I think we need to move on. We have 7 other rooms to hear from.
okay, sorry.
Sorry to cut you off.
Everybody's comments.
No, I do. I liked how you did the the majority report and the minority report. That is very helpful. So let's see. I see Jessica Tovar. Jessica, which room were you representing?
I didn't capture the number. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll just put your name. We'll figure it out later, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. I did the same thing. Okay, so
No
a lot
problem.
of similar stuff. So when it came to the agrivoltaics, folks were concerned about the water and concerned that there's only test plots in other states and other places, and it requires a lot of water. Let's see. The photos we saw seem to be growing things rather than having sheep grazing, and it seemed like the photos maybe were of things in other countries, not necessarily here or in the US. The concerns, again, the water, animal habitat, migration of wildlife need to be carefully analyzed. North Livermore is for grazing cattle. You can't do that with industrial solar. Let's see. Restrictions like Measure D, concerns around the aesthetics and keeping the land rural. Folks really value the farmland. Think that we should test this in other locations, small projects, maybe on college campuses. When it came to the photovoltaics, there's less mitigation, not having an alternative use. We need more data to draw on those that are currently in existence in the state of California. They do take up a smaller footprint versus the agricultural voltaics. When it came to Williamson Act, well, we had a question. It's like, since it's a state act, like what's in the purview of the county? Like what latitude does the county have on this quote unquote state act? Folks really agreed that it's an all or nothing. So that was pretty much a consensus on that, all or nothing. And in the next section, no prime soils with battery storage or photovoltaics. We want to preserve the land based on the soil quality, and there was reference to the revised story index. Let's see. What should the county ask for in return? Nothing. It's not up for question. We have a pretty firm consensus around that. That energy should be closer to where it's used in the urban areas in the built environment. Also, the idea of putting it on the aqueducts to keep the water from evaporating also came up. Let's see, conflicts, the local versus the large. What's a reasonable compromise? Folks really like the idea of having like multi-purpose or stacking functions, co-benefits, adders, whatever you want to call it. So like putting solar, for example, on parking lots, on schools, on jails, on large buildings in the county, for example. Emphasis on local build out first and other alternatives, and emphasis on other programs like energy efficiency to reduce our energy waste, and demand response programs, and using less energy. Let's see. Other things that came up was that we don't want to compromise habitat, and we think that the maps need more improvement. And then what limits should be placed on projects, overall cap like megawatts or acres. What came up was limiting the amount of harm done to habitat, to the aesthetics. Other characteristics that came up was this consideration of slope, proximity. The idea of zoning came up as well. Questions around enforcement, like who's monitoring this and what are the penalties. Just needing more information. One thing that came up was needing more transparency, like how are these projects getting considered? And then concerns around like the amount of energy and how it's being used. And there was an example of the Aramis project, how 80% of that energy was actually being produced for another county or another city, in this case, San Francisco. So that was a concern. And folks agreed that they recommend a second meeting with the community because there's a lot of questions and want more information around biological habitat, proximity to power lines or substations. Consider reusing power plant sites that are being decommissioned for sites for new clean energy. An example that came up was Vallecita's GE plant. And alternatives for batteries instead of cobalt or lithium, the use of hemp batteries, which I know Winona LaDuke is a huge proponent of. So that's it for my group.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next, I see David Rounds with his hand up. David, what room were you in?
I think we were group 4.
Okay.
So I'd be happy to report out if you're ready.
Yes, go ahead.
So under agrivoltaics, I mean, the question the group had was, can the prior use be sustained if it's converted to agrivoltaics? And we need to consider the value of the land and the agriculture and how it is impacted by AV. A lot of discussion about, well, is AV even going to work out here? And do we know what it is? And should we have a policy when we don't really know quite how to define agrivoltaics? And I think following that, there was no examples of AV on the West Coast. And it seems like industrialization, which might be in conflict with other land use issues like Measure D. There was the group generally felt that there are a lot of places for solar other than agrivoltaics. And it was pointed out that solar is not here forever and can go back to prior use. So the policy needs to address the any permanent impacts on the land of putting in solar. But the big issue was how to define it. How can you make policy about something you can't define? But somebody also pointed out that perfect is the enemy of the good. So I leave that with you, Albert. Let me see. Williamson Act. there was a lot of talk about, we should do everything we can to incentivize solar. That Williamson Act land should not be pure photovoltaic. But we should incentivize landowners to have some sort of, if it's workable, to have agrivoltaics. I don't understand what I just said. So concerned about impacted land, so any policy might address, yeah, okay, I already talked about that. So in general, Williamson land was Williamson Act land. You know, maybe there's a change in the percentage, maybe there's not, but you shouldn't put pure PV there. And consider how to incentivize agrivoltaics, assuming you can figure out what agrivoltaics is. On the important farmland, it was pretty much a consensus that no solar on prime farmland. And there was some should we consider including open space as part of the discussion when you're talking about protecting prime farmland. And that was supported by the comment that solar is modular, it can go anywhere. And if we prioritize distributed solar first, and maybe smaller projects that could be kept out of sight, we could have a win-win. And if prime land is used, it definitely needs to be mitigated. On the battery storage, it's pointed out that batteries have a small footprint. There were concerns about environmental impacts of battery storage operations on the water table. And then should the policy talk about putting battery storage, focusing that on existing power plant areas that are being decommissioned because they're already on the grid. Okay, so conflicts. Again, a pretty common theme in our group was, you put solar anywhere you can that'll have the least impact and focus on distributed first, like warehouses, lakes, though apparently that's a problem with birds, open parking lots, and incentivize that development and do this first before using farmland. Somebody had the idea that if we did a better job using gray water, we could make some of the farmland that has prime soils if irrigated into prime farmland. And then there's a concern that when considering the cost of the energy that somebody has to pay to buy solar, that the industrial size solars are kind of get a break because we don't take into account the value of the land that is encumbered by the photovoltaic project. Limits should be placed, what limits should be placed on the project? So no solar on resource management or water management land. Consider visibility issues and maybe do that along with using smaller projects that can be kept out of sight. Incentivize the solar and make it easier to permit. There was concern about how to preserve habitat, and the group definitely believed that we needed to prioritize habitats for special species and biodiversity. It was pointed out that ABAG and the state have identified areas and policies that are already in place about preservation, wildlife, and biodiversity, and those need to be considered as part of the policy. And again, it was mentioned the smaller projects might actually have less impact because you can tuck them away. And somebody mentioned that there are states, Massachusetts, I think was mentioned, that, for example, have put a 5 megawatt limit on industrial solar. And then the group very much wants everybody to know that we recognize the twin crisis of biodiversity loss and climate change. And the policy needs to prioritize biodiversity and open space and incentivize distributed over covering agricultural lands. And I think that's it, unless somebody else wants to add.
Well, thank you very much, David. Appreciate the concise report back. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next group. Allison, Allie.
Hi, we're group 3.
Group 3, okay.
Yeah, and I'll just try to go over some big themes, and if anyone else from my group wants to jump in, that would be great. So our group was really concerned with continuing to respect and comply with Measure D and the Williamson Act, so not looking to change or challenge those. The group was concerned that there was no demonstration of local viability for agrivoltaics, and that water is a major limiting factor to ag in Alameda County, so that needs to be considered specifically. And that we need to understand more about agrivoltaics in general, and to understand if there's a net benefit to agricultural operations or not. Important farmlands and ag productivity have a direct relationship to irrigation capacity. So that needs to be considered. Agrivoltaics is attainable, but first and foremost is an energy generating project. So we need to look at the value of an ag activity before co-locating that activity with energy production versus after. So there's a different value depending on the type of agriculture, whether it's irrigated, jobs created, et cetera. And an ag business or production or management plan would be a litmus test to understand if a project has ag as part of its core competencies. Ag and energy interests need to be planned and developed in tandem so that ag isn't just incidental. If we're going to set limits on agrivoltaics, it needs to be on acreage, not on wattage, was a specific recommendation. To the question of the 1010 Williamson Act rule, if the mission here is to focus on utility scale solar, 10 acres is too small, so it becomes a bit of a moot point. The group did have some interest in mitigation, but we didn't know how to go about it. And someone pointed out that the riskiest time to soil for a new solar operation would be in the first 3 years, including the construction window. And that fire risk would be the biggest worry in the West, and that you need mowing and sheep grazing, et cetera, as fire prevention measures underneath the panels. Groundwater contamination might not be as big an issue, but battery fires would be a real issue that the county's plan would need to consider. There was a consideration that agrivoltaics is different from photovoltaics, and they need to be defined and treated differently in any plan that the county comes up with. It was pointed out that we need objective performance standards for evaluating projects. And we were cautioned to look at developing agrivoltaic properties, cautioned that as we look at developing agrivoltaic projects, that sheep and goat industries are in decline and in trouble, and that we wouldn't want to base our policy solely around those types of operations. That's all I've got, unless anybody else wants to add from our group.
All right, thank you, Allie. Appreciate it. I didn't know that about the sheep and the goats. It's good to know. I counted, I think, 5 groups. Is there someone missing? Oh, here's Don. Okay, Don. I think you're on the air.
I'm unmuting, and I'm getting my video going here.
We can hear you. Thank you, Don.
Yes, thank you.
You were group 6, right? Group 6?
I think we were group 6, and we were a small group.
Okay.
And it was a diverse group of folks, and we did have the benefit of having a very large agricultural property owner in North Livermore as part of our group. So we really respected that perspective. My notes are a little sketchy here. I didn't realize I was going to be the one reporting out for our group, so forgive me, but I think we echo some of the things that have already been mentioned. On the first question on agrivoltaics, that seemed like a very interesting option for a property owner. And so it should be something that should be looked at. I do want to say that the common theme that ran through the responses was flexibility, and then allowing the property owner to determine what would be the best way for them to approach solar installation or agrivoltaics or whatever it was that they wanted to do on their property in a way that best worked for them, keeping within the industry standards for an technology application, and then also any of the existing environmental conditions on their property, keeping all of that in mind. Moving on to the Williamson Act, actually the comment on that is why set a limit? Take the handcuffs off of the property owner. If there's a compatible use on their land and they would want to do more than 10% of solar, then, and if they can make the case, then we should do it. And to my team there, I gave you permission to chime in as I'm going through all of this. Important farmlands, prime soils, and should these be developed with solar battery projects? There was a pause there on the definition of farmlands and prime soils. Prime soil seems to be if you have access to water. And there are agricultural areas that do not have access to water. So that sort of changes the dynamics there. If a agricultural property owner is going to be considering how their land will be used. So that's just a note for the planning department to keep in mind. What should the county ask for in return? And this was made very clear that the energy generated, first call on that should be for Alameda County residents before selling it out beyond the county borders. Crops. Oh, another thing on the solar battery projects is the property owner believes that there are a number of crops that are compatible with solar. So this is a bit of insight for all of us non-agricultural property owners that we learned from that conversation. The next one was conflicts between open space ag and desire for local solar. What is the reasonable compromise? Again, our subject matter expert opined, why do we have these color-coded land designations? There are only more restrictive rules, and when and how were the property owners consulted? So that is another note for the planning department. And what limits should be placed on projects? Should there be a total limit in acreage or megawatts? And basically it says the entire group basically agreed there shouldn't be either. It should be appropriate for the site and the landowner, taking into account the local environment. Of course, they would have to mitigate any impacts. Common sense instead of arbitrary rules. Keep the rules flexible. And indeed, it could be a case-by-case situation. And I think that about covers it for our group. And just a little note here, Measure D keeps coming up here. And the comment was made that Measure D has not saved agriculture. In fact, it has only served to slow investment in agricultural properties and operations. So another note for the planning department. And my group, if I've missed anything burning, please chime in. Otherwise, that covers it for our group.
Okay. Thank you very much, Don. See, this is the three Larry group, it looks like. Speaker, you're free to speak.
Hello. Okay, so we probably were group one in this case. I was trying to keep track of who was which group. And we had an interesting group of folks. We had about 7 people, and we were sort of split on a lot of the ideas. And at the beginning, it looked like we weren't going to have a lot of consensus, but at the end, we did have a lot of consensus. Everybody pretty much agreed, except for one person, that that solar should be maxed out on rooftops in urban areas, large buildings before we start covering open space or ag land, wildlife habitat, and that the ideal situation would be distributed energy, right in the urban environment. So, and we think that would be possible, except for the reality of the situation with the way that PG&E works, and their resistance to it is what's making it really, really hard. So to try to get back on track, except the one person was the youngest, I think, that disagreed, and he is so stressed by global warming that the only thing that makes him feel better is seeing photovoltaic as much as possible, and that gives him some kind of hope for the future and brings his stress level down. So for agrivoltaic, most of us felt like it had more questions than answers about it, that it would have been nice to, instead of just hearing a internet description of it, to actually learn a little bit about it before we comment on it and how experimental it is, what, if it really works, if it can really work in our climate. But thinking that it may be a good thing, especially putting solar panels around the margins of cropland or over the top of cropland that maybe is not being used right now for shade-loving things and grazers and whatnot, that it could possibly be used to for grazing. For Williamson Act, we were split again. 3 people felt like we should be changing the Williamson Act, and as Don said, not handcuffing landowners, that the problem is so severe that we should be maybe allowing more PV than 10%, except on prime ag land. Pretty much everybody agreed that that should not be covered. For farmland and prime land, I kind of covered that on the Williamson Act, and by the way, there was a huge amount of overlap in what we talked about and what the general themes that everybody was talking about. So that's a good thing. I think we are hitting on important points. As far as battery storage, we all kind of felt like we need a lot more battery storage. One person in our group felt like it's a lot, we need more long-term battery storage, 24-hour and longer, and that we should be looking at other types of battery like water gravity and do some innovative things here, and that it might also take, he especially felt like it might take loosening up restrictions to be able to accomplish that. Other type of gravity storage, and hopefully we can get away from lithium storage and put batteries where they're not covering a lot of land, unless it's like, again, in the margins. But as a wildlife biologist, I don't like to hear about putting things in the margins, because that's usually the only open space where a lot of wildlife species can use. So as far as conflicts, people felt in our group like we should also be putting solar panels on top of water, that we should be putting solar, about the same thing, about a split. Half of our group felt like we need to be putting more solar everywhere, and because of the realities of the politics and PG&E, that the situation is so severe that we should be covering more marginal farmland, and except the one person felt like we should be putting solar everywhere. The other folks felt like we should keep solar out of wildlife habitat, wildlife corridors, riparian zones, ridges, and areas that are already parts of planning processes to conserve open spaces and wildlife habitat. I think that's most of that, but let me go through really quick because I did make notes on what everybody said. So commercial solar batteries. How many minutes do I have left?
I think you're the last group. So if
Okay,
you need another minute, I think that'd be okay.
Okay, another minute would be perfect. Thank you. So I'm just going to go through all my notes and see if I covered everything. Okay, Williamson Act, get rid of land use restraints to expedite green energy. That was one person, but I definitely disagreed with that. Floating solar, industrial. Yeah, everybody agreed that there's so much potential with industrial rooftop in our group, and that PG&E easements and whatnot are just seem to be blocking everything. So if there's any way we could have a citizens initiative or something to get PG&E out of the way. I think everybody felt ideally microgrids would be perfect, and distributed energy. Oh, that we should also be utilizing our labs. One person was from the Lawrence Livermore lab, and he said we have 2 really important energy labs. They should be in conversation with the county, and that they have a really great plan on distributed energy and what we could be doing here. And I think I covered all of it. And feel free, if anybody else, if I missed something important, please raise your hand real quick and hopefully they can get you in. Thank you.
Okay, we have Alan here.
I was in the 3 Larry group with Lawrence. Thank you for relaying that. He did mention, and that was correct, that we all agreed that rooftop solar was ideal. However, Lawrence did not quite circle around to the fact that while rooftop solar was ideal, the majority of us agreed that industrial solar was necessary and that we wanted as much of it as we wanted it not to be restricted. The majority, I believe, were in favor of having agrivoltaics even on good soil and have photovoltaics on the other, have that accessible elsewhere. We were all, I believe the majority was in favor of reducing the restriction of the Williamson Act. So again, thank you, Lawrence. I think I did want to reemphasize that the majority were in favor of industrial solar, and I don't want to give the impression that our group was mainly fixated on rooftop solar.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Let's see here. Looks like we just have one other person to, oh, Mike, are you there? Sure, I think you raised your hand.
I needed to be unmuted. I thought you forgot about us.
What group is that? Are you, which 5?
We're 8.
8, the last one, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's see, for agrivoltaic, we felt it was more conceptual than anything that could be immediately implemented, that it needed a lot more testing. Whatever it is, it shouldn't damage habitat. One person said we should be encouraging regenerative agriculture, although it was very difficult to get a good definition of that. But again, that more testing was needed. We should be doing more research. It could be implemented in a limited area, let's say 2 acres, to determine what its viability is. Good definitions for it needed to be made, not just bees and sheep. It should enhance agriculture, and that both options, both agrivoltaic and industrial solar, should be allowed though. The Williamson Act, we were kind of split. 2 people thought the—
Mike, could I I'm sorry, that last point, I didn't get that one. It sounded like
the majority of people felt that both agrivoltaic and large-scale solar should be allowed, that it shouldn't, that the policy should not be limited strictly to agrivoltaic.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, Williamson Act, we were split. 2 people thought it should be left in place as is. 2 people were not sure and basically had no opinion. 1 person wanted to change it and get solar implemented as quickly as possible on Williamson Act land. And 1 person felt changing something that's in place for such a long time could have unintended consequences and therefore probably a bad idea to change it. Let's see, what was the next one? Important farmland, prime soil. All but 1 person in our group said that there should be no solar development on prime soil or farmland of statewide importance. 1 person was wanted to be particularly cautious about battery storage on agricultural land, and that decommissioned power plants probably were a better location. They're near a substation and they don't have all the issues. And 1 person felt that it would be fine on prime soil with the proviso that there would be no grading and that the use permit would be for a limited time and that the installation would have to be dismantled at that point. The next one was reasonable compromises. Most of the group felt that the solar development should be kept in built-in environments. We need agriculture. it should be preserved. Some people felt the over the aqueduct option is a very good idea and should be seriously studied. People should look at other options rather than take open space. There should be no land on Measure D or high value agriculture or habitat. That was probably a majority of us, not completely. For the group said that we should put much more concentration on nuclear power, that is really could be our salvation in terms of carbon-free energy. And one person felt that the use of large-scale agricultural land to some degree should be allowed. And the last one was the one on the limits. Most people felt that there should be some limit. We had a discussion about the idea that there should be limits placed within geographic areas. In other words, that large-scale solar should not be concentrated in one area, that once a certain percentage in an area was developed, that would be the limit for that area. That it should be limited on lands that have biodiversity or habitat value. The Bay Area is one of 6 hotspots in the United States for extinction events. Some felt it was not the best question. Again, that the percentage limit should be based on a distribution, not just simply a percentage of Alameda County. And one person felt that there should be limits put on development because of the economic impact that it could impose on neighboring properties. And one person felt that there should be a limit of 60% on large-scale agricultural land. And that was it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it. I think you're the only group that actually put a number out there on that last question. I see one more hand up. Jason, were you representing the group? Did we not get you already?
I did. I don't recall if you called on me or if one of my group mates spoke. I was with Daryl Sweet, David McCorden, I think, Eric Zell, and Sean Kyle.
Okay, well, Jason, I'm not sure if either, but if you're going to report out, please do so.
Yeah, I can keep it brief.
Thank you.
I'll do my best to just try and summarize sort of where everybody landed. I won't sort of speak on every comment that was made.
Okay.
So regarding I think the first one was agrivoltaic.
Yes.
Agrivoltaics and attainable. The group was pretty split. One thing to lift up that was concerning for one of our group mates was, they're concerned about the infrastructure and the water specifically, and sort of using it to clean the panels or using it in the construction of it. And they were really concerned about preserving portions to be developed. Perhaps maybe if a parcel was being considered, maybe doing 1/2 of the parcel with renewables, and then the other half sort of untouched and left to whatever it is. But the rest of us in the group sort of, if it was possible, well, actually, sorry, one was in particularly like not even in favor of it. But as we talked about it, he felt like, if there were multiple uses sort of done in an appropriate way, then it could potentially be feasible to do agrivoltaics. But he did lift up the fact that there wasn't any sort of known successful project in our area that we could speak to. And then sort of, this is where the needs of the residents directly impacted by agricultural development to make sure that their needs are being sort of heard and being met. The next one was the Williamson Act question. We had a couple of folks that were, they were not in favor of relaxing the rule, and they were not in favor of allowing a subsidy to those property owners in the event that they do develop in this manner. However, when we started discussing it, what came out of it, a potential compromise would be, you know, if an owner was developing a portion of the land in that 10 to 10 sort of with that 10 to 10 rule in mind, in those portions, they would not be able to, or, you know, maybe no subsidy on the PV or the renewable portion of those lands. And then if they still had a portion that was agricultural, they would still be, those lands would still fall under the Williamson Act. That makes sense.
Yep.
And I think that was the sort of the main one on there as we talked that through. I apologize, I had to step away for a bit. That's why I'm sort of logging back in right now, but I had to do the same thing around the time when we were talking about prime soils, which was that next one. You know, should the areas be developed with solar, and then, you know, what should the county ask for in return? As I came back to the conversation, what came up again was looking, can we look into areas that aren't impacted when it comes to like sort of general public use? So I think that what these group mates were speaking of were areas of open space that were used generally by the public, to maybe use those areas, to consider those areas of open use first before these areas. We were not all sort of in agreement around that. While we are all in agreement to preserve the environment, you know, where to start these developments, the group as a whole wasn't in the same place. So some were saying, you know, stay away from perhaps agricultural areas and go to densely populated areas. And some of us were in favor of using densely populated areas as well as the agricultural areas as appropriate and approved, I suppose. Moving on to that next one, which was the conflicts of the open space. A couple of folks were pretty vocal about exhausting all commercial and residential areas in other areas of Alameda County, not, you know, limited to Livermore or Oakland or Fremont, but just, you know, consider exhausting all of those, considering how to leverage municipalities or even insurance companies to incentivize developing more on existing buildings. Something else that was brought up that just to sort of name that any sort of land use issues they typically get challenged by community members when there's sort of change, and you know, these developments are sort of no different than that. But also noting that, you know, a battery backup project or more battery backup options really help protect the general community as a whole from, you know, blackouts or brownouts when they occur, and which they will. And then sort of that last one, you know, I think that a number of us sort of believe that it was a hard question to answer, and that, you know, one of the statements that was made is that we need to know sort of where we're going before we can address this. So, you know, thinking about how to, knowing sort of how many megawatts we want to produce, knowing how much acreage is perhaps available that we could even use to do this stuff, might be helpful to have all of that sort of information before you sort of can answer this question. But all of that sort of being known was to try and balance how much open space is used with how much open space we sort of leave to be open. And as an example, right, if a person is considering a rooftop solar system on their home, right, they would have an energy audit done. Is it reasonable, or has it already been done a sort of countywide, what do you call it, a countywide audit for consumption, and then sort of take that number to the developers and say, hey, as a county, we consume, 300 megawatts every minute. Maybe we need to develop, systems that can accommodate that much, but sort of spread out. So, yeah, that's what I have.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Albert.
Jason. All right. Let's see, we're going about almost half an hour over. I see there's 2 other hands. I thought that was all the groups there. Let's see, Sarah, were you part of one of these groups that haven't reported out yet, or?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to request a copy of your presentation. I think you probably have everybody's emails.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to send them out, or will there be a link available to the
Yes.
presentation?
Yeah, what I was going to do is post the recording of this meeting and all the presentations that you saw tonight. It'll be up shortly.
And that'll be, sorry, where can we find it?
So there's a link on the agenda that has the web page.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And I guess just I had one more hand up, and I guess you get the last word tonight, Carl.
Got it. Will each breakout room recording be available as well, or just the whole side?
Yeah, just I think that there was some. I don't think that the breakout rooms got recorded, but
Gotcha.
certainly, but this last part definitely is being recorded now.
Understood. If those rooms are available, I'd love to just hear the robustness of the conversations and the diversity of opinions. I was not able to fully engage. I showed up half an hour late. I didn't get to see the beginning of Mr. Lopez's presentation. And then within our group, thank you, Larry, #1, for your feedback. Alan, thank you for good balanced comments in there. On the agrivoltaics, I think we were pretty much leaning it. Obviously, it's not proven, but it's effectively using shade technology, which is used like all the time. And then it can be integrated in. Now, it's tough, it's expensive. Let the free market take care of that. We know there's challenges there. There was some good discussion about soil health, the nutrition of the soil, pre-cattle grazing, where those grasses are flowing away and the likes. It was just sort of that forward look at it, but no water and infrastructure is too expensive. So it's not going to happen because the free market won't allow it, but it doesn't mean it's not viable just because we haven't had one here. I think that was said and generally agreed upon, and I personally agree with that. So I don't think we need to throw a baby out with the bathwater. There's not going to be a lot of it because of the water, because it's expensive and the likes. That said, why restrict? So I think there was a balance to our group in that regard. Thank you for the time. Thank you all for engaging. Sorry for being late.
All right, well, folks, I think that takes us to the conclusion of tonight. I wanted to thank everybody for participating. In terms of next steps, I'm gonna again put all this information on our website, the recording, so you could watch it again, kind of hear all the variety of opinions here. It's a lot of information to take in. From me personally, as a staff member that needs to distill this back to our board. But I will do that over the next couple of weeks and get it into some shape or form that's presentable to the board. As I mentioned before, there's a smaller working group that helped put this information together tonight. So we will be meeting again probably several times before this goes to the full Board of Supervisors, and we will be making a decision about whether or not another community meeting is needed. And so, yeah, I think that's in terms of some of the next steps. I do have all of your emails, and I've reached out to you via email for this meeting. And again, the main communication is going to be either on our website or direct emails to you. So feel free to check there on occasion. And then also my email is on the website as well. If you need to get a hold of me for whatever reason, I like to think that I'm pretty accessible to our community members on these issues. So feel free to reach out if you need to. And yeah, I think with that, that's it. I think for tonight, again, I want to thank you all for your participation. There will be a summary of this meeting developed, not just the video record of it, but a written record of it as well. Will probably be very much summarized. I did hear a lot of repeat on some of the concerns that were raised, so we'll try to distill those down. And we will be in touch. Again, I think that there will likely be another community meeting in later on this month or early February, and then we'll take it from there. So thanks again for all your participation, and we will be seeing you all very shortly. Thank you very much. Have a nice night.